Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, dear audience. On behalf of Iris Laufenberg, our artistic director, who unfortunately is sick tonight and cannot be with us here, I would like to welcome you all to Deutsches Theater. My name is Carla Meder, I'm the head of dramaturgy here, and it's my pleasure to say a few words as a representative of the landlady, so to say. Please excuse my English. I wrote everything by myself, not with an AI, and you can tell by my German accent that it's all true. First of all, let me tell you that it's no coincidence that this event tonight is taking place here at Deutsches Theater. Or let me put it like this, it's a small theater world, and sometimes it crosses continents. Iris and I met Ayad Akhtar 8 years ago when he came to Austria to attend 2 shows of his first big hit in the German theater-speaking world. It was Disgraced, Geächtet in German. One of them has been at our theater, Schauspielhaus Graz, where we have been working at this time. Not only Iris and I, but also 3 of the former Graz ensemble members who perform characters in this play are now here with us in Berlin. And after Disgraced, we staged another play by Ayad Akhtar, The Who and the What, like half of the German theater world. And I'm not exaggerating. Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, many theaters have been put on their plans, placed by Ayad Akhtar. The numbers are really impressive. Every other season or so, there is a play that is widely received throughout the German-speaking theater landscape, mostly, I have to admit, by non-German authors, which leads not only to the question which stories we tell, that's one of the questions tonight, but also to how we tell them. Here at Deutsches Theater, we will open next season with McNeil, Ayad Akhtar's new play. The opening night will be on September 26th, and we hope to see you all here again with us, so please save the date. I would like to say a few words about this play because I think the conversation of the 3 men you will see in a moment here on stage will revolve around topics of McNeil. I'm not sure that everybody in the audience already had a chance to see one of the productions in New York or in Vienna, where it had its first premiere in German last Saturday, a few days ago, or read the text. So, what is McNeil about? Jacob McNeil, the title hero, is a prime example of the proverbial old white male. He also is a prototype for a masculinity that is increasingly branded and also widely seen as toxic today. But the good thing is, it's still good for a surprise. And Ayad Akhtar portrays McNeil as a famous American writer in his late 60s who has wasted himself, his relationships, and his health on art, on literature. He is a many-sided character, and for sure he is great actor material. Soon after the beginning of the play, McNeil wins the Nobel Prize for Literature, which tells us he must be indeed one of the great writers of our time. McNeil's fame even increases after he publishes a new novel in a surprisingly new style and first time with a female main hero. However, it soon turns out that his book is based on an unpublished manuscript left behind by his late wife, who never could have a breakthrough as an author herself in the shadow of her famous husband. A scandal about plagiarism, or rather exploitation of others' creative material, is waiting around the corner. But McNeil is up to the debate, and so the supposed scandal becomes a thought game about the relationship between one's own and others' experience as the sources of inspiration for masterpieces. Not to mention the fact that the will to entertain, in combination with ambition, endurance, honesty, are absolutely needed for the writing of great work. But in the end, the possibility of writing a whole convincing novel with the help of AI in just 2 days is projected at the horizon of a possible future of the arts. The play ends with McNeil's suicide and his elevation, written by an AI which has taken over to write the story. To slow down progress so much that it does not do any harm. That's a definition of conservatism that Bernd Stegemann, a colleague of mine, just told me. To slow down progress so much that it does not do any harm. And it's quite the opposite from what's quietly happening in little steps in our bags, with the omnipresent influence of AI sneaking into our lives, making us dependent from digital devices, teasing us playfully, and trying to become our best friend. It's hard to resist the promises of safety, convenience, and help that come with new technology. However, it seems as if our autonomy in many things is in serious danger, and this is definitely a political issue. McNeil tells of how humans are threatened by artificial intelligence and that we can only resist it by becoming aware of our lies in service of a higher truth that makes use of the theatrical, literary lie. Underlying, we find the ancient and basal theater conflict of appearance and reality, Schein and Sein in German, in a mildly futurist environment that is already part of our present. So again, I'm very happy that we can have Ayad Akhtar here tonight in person with his colleague and translator Daniel Kehlmann to have a discussion with Jeffrey Goldberg, editor-in-chief from the Atlantic Monthly, on art, artificial intelligence, and the stories we tell. Thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you for choosing us as a venue. And I give the floor now to Daniel Benjamin, President of the American Academy in Berlin. Thank you very much.
Good evening. I am indeed Daniel Benjamin. I'm the president of the American Academy. I want to thank Carla for that introduction and for her introduction to tonight's event. It is really a big deal for us to be here. The American Academy in Berlin is 26 years old. The Deutsches Theater has about 130 years on us. And and it is, of course, one of the great stages in the Deutschsprachige Raum, in the German-speaking world. So this is a huge honor for us. And let me just say that I hope it's not the last time I'm allowed to come up here. Indeed, I could very well get used to this. So it is fair to say that the word transatlantic is not the word of the week. But nonetheless, the American Academy in Berlin is dedicated to connecting the two sides of the ocean in dialogue and bringing together leading thinkers, writers, artists to engage with each other and discuss the most pressing ideas of our time. And that is just what we're doing tonight. Our home, as many of you will know, is out on the Wannsee, and we do hope you'll come visit. But we also work to have more and more events like this one in Mitte, and we'll be back soon, I'm sure. So this evening's discussion, Art, AI, and the Stories We Tell, comes not a moment too soon. AI has been a train barreling down on us. It is becoming an ever larger part of our world. And its implications go far beyond those of just improving the technologies that surround us, and it really does touch on the essence of what it means to be human. Just to give a plug to a former fellow at the American Academy, the great literature scholar Martin Puchner, who teaches at Harvard, has created a whole array of different chatbots that will talk, that one will be Socrates, another will be Nietzsche, another will be Wittgenstein, and you can talk and learn from them, and it's an extraordinary experience. So it's just one of the little examples of how education and our intellectual formation may change. But what role does AI play in the creation of art, and how does it shape the stories we tell? For this, it's in some ways a bit more unnerving because we think that art puts us in contact with one of the mysteries of what it is to be human. So luckily, we have really intelligent and remarkable people to discuss this tonight. Ayad Akhtar, about whom you've just heard so much, Daniel Kehlmann, and Jeffrey Goldberg. Their perspectives are quite remarkable, and they will offer us a rare opportunity to dive deep into how AI is influencing the stories we tell and how it will help us grapple with the profound shifts taking place in our world. Let me just briefly introduce the three of them, and then I will get out of the way. Jeffrey Goldberg is, I guess he's the guest I know best, because he is not only a former fellow of the American Academy, he was on the Wannsee in 2015, he's also a member of our Board of Trustees. He is the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, and under his leadership, that publication has won the first 3 Pulitzer Prizes in its history, as well as the National Magazine Award for General Excellence for the past 3 years in a row. Jeff is also the moderator of Washington Week with The Atlantic, a television show that's existed for quite a long time before he took it over. And it's kind of an institution in Washington that discusses the news and is broadcast on the public broadcasting system. He's also the author of a number of books and many, many, many terrific works of journalism. And I should say that we've been joking at the Academy that it's Jeff Goldberg Week in Berlin. And if you decide you absolutely need to see more of him while he's in town, you are invited to our event at the Berliner Festspiel on Thursday at 7:30, where he will speak as part of a panel on Donald Trump, a polarized public and the end of democracy. And isn't that optimistic? Tickets are available via the Berliner Festspiel website. Daniel Kehlmann, I think all of you know, is surely one of the most renowned German writers of his generation and of his time. Many of you will undoubtedly have read Die Vermessung der Welt, The Measuring of the World, which came out in 2005 and is one of the most successful German novels of the last half century. His book Till, which came out in 2019, was on the short list of the International Booker Prize. He has been awarded innumerable prizes, almost all of them named after famous writers, including the Candide Prize, the Per Olaf Enquist Prize, the Kleist Prize, the Thomas Mann Prize, and the Friedrich Hölderlin Prize. There are some more obscure ones you can ask him about. And one thing that I recently learned is that Daniel doesn't only write his own books, but he also translates from English to German, and one of these translations is a play called McNeil. So that brings us to Ayad Akhtar. Ayad is a Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright and novelist. His latest play, McNeil, premiered at Lincoln Center's Vivian Beaumont Theater just last fall. Just a few days ago, the German translation of McNeil made its debut at the Burgtheater in Vienna, a theater almost as renowned as this one. Ayad is the author of 2 critically acclaimed novels, Homeland Elegies from 2020, which was on the New York Times 10 Best Books of the Year list, and American Dervish, which came out in 2012. Along with the Pulitzer Prize, he's also received a basket full of prestigious awards and has earned fellowships at the American Academy in Rome, at MacDowell, the Sundance Institute, Yaddo, and he doesn't know it yet, but he is a future fellow at the American Academy in Berlin. He's also well known for his powerful plays such as Junk, Disgraced, The Who, and The What. So with that, I am going to get out of the way and let you hear a remarkable discussion. Gentlemen.
Thank you. Thanks very much for being here. Thank you for the warm welcome and introduction. We're not going to talk about AI tonight. We're going to talk about America's pivot to the Kremlin, actually. No, actually, we're going to spend an hour not talking about that because I think it'll help my headache go away if we talk about something light and airy like the coming domination of the human species by AI. Thank you, both of you, for being here. And I thought we would start by just talking about something very basic, which is why does this matter so much? Ayad, you've actually done a wonderful job for me of helping me understand what you see as the importance of this conversation and the world-changing, consciousness-changing aspects of the technology. But why don't you start, and Daniel, just please jump in, by talking about where we are in the revolution, if you will.
Thanks, Jeff. Thank you for having us. It's so wonderful to be on this stage. It's an incredible stage. It seems to me that within the culture sector, within the literary world, at least in the United States, and amongst artists in general, there's very little what would be called situational awareness. That is to say, awareness of what the situation we're in is. And I don't want to be alarmist by saying it that way, but the artificial intelligence that we are experiencing now is really downstream of automated cognitive technologies that have been at the root of our society for the last decade and a half. So much of our cognition has been farmed off to our devices, and so much of our municipal thinking, whether it's the functioning of markets or the delivery of goods or the production of goods or the performing of any of these municipal services that run our societies, are all being conducted with automated cognition. And now we have, for the first time, the capacity to open the hood and to interface with the technology in language that anthropomorphizes these processes. And what we're seeing is the staggering effectiveness of this technology. And I started using it when it went live in November 2022. We started having a conversation maybe a year later. Already in that 1 year, the advances were astonishing to me. In that first year, I had read a script written by ChatGPT that a group out in Hollywood had come up with, a 30-page television pilot, which was hands down the best script I had read in a long time. And that was April of 2023. We're now getting on to April of 2025. Daniel's going to tell you some great stories about some experiences he's had, the experiences I'm having with the large language models. And one of the things that I would just say is for folks who haven't used this technology and have maybe said, write me a poem, and it's come up with something really dumb, and then you kind of dismiss it. The reality is the more you use it, the better it gets. And the quality of the output is directly proportional to the quality of your prompts. The more it understands what it is you're looking for, the more specific it can be, and it can be very specific indeed. It is going to come for a kind of intellectual work that we have assumed was safe at scale. It's going to happen. Does it mean that our societies are going to crumble? No, but it means that there's going to be a very significant adaptation required. And the more that we understand that, the better. The least important question to me is whether it's going to make art. It's already making art, and we're going to figure out how to use it to make art, as all these technologies, whether it was during the silent era and suddenly talkies were the thing, and people were thinking, well, talkies are immoral, so I'm not going to make talkies, I'm going to stick with silent film. AI is going to be part of the artistic process as well. I guess that would be my kind of general perspective on why this matters.
I want to ask you one thing about art. We'll continue to talk about art, because I don't know if I agree with you that what it makes is art.
No, but
simulacrum of art, but...
Well, let's talk about that.
Well, yeah, we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it later. Can I ask you, before I turn to Daniel, to talk about, maybe you could address this question of art. I want to ask you the question that everybody here in the audience is obviously thinking about, which is Jeffrey Goldberg going to lose his job because of AI? And by extension, all the rest of us.
I don't think you, Jeff, are going to lose your job. I think you are someone who's curatorial intelligence and interrelational, one of the things that's interesting about journalism, just as a fundamental, it's based on sourcing, and it's based on information, it's based on conversation. You have to have relationships to be able to get the story. I'm not sure that AI chatbots are going to have the quality of relationship that are going to allow for the breaking of scoops. So I think that in a way there are corners of every field that are, whether it's the theater, for example, maybe I could be wrong, but I don't think you're going to see robots on the stage of the Deutsches Theater and people really being excited about what the robots are saying to the audience. I think the theater is somewhat immune, but not all aspects of it. So I think every corner of human endeavor has got these exceptions to it, and I do think you're going to have a job. So
I wasn't actually looking for an answer. I was just trying to make a joke, but I appreciate it, though. I really do. And I want to come back to the question of work and society and our purpose on Earth, especially if LLMs, if large language models, can actually do things as well as we do. Daniel, your job. Do you think that you're safe?
I mean,
you've you've done quite a bit of experimentation.
Yeah, I did. Let me back up a little bit. I was one of the first people, not in the world, by far not. I'm sure you were there before me, but I was one of the first people in the literary world that I know who were allowed to experiment with a large language model. There was in January 2020. I was invited to be part of an experiment at a Silicon Valley company. It was not OpenAI. It was Salesforce, and they had an LLM, which by then I had no idea what that is. And they asked me to write a short story together with the LLM. They were looking for a writer to try that, and I said, sure, I want to do that. And what I experienced was absolutely unbelievable to me. I couldn't write a short story with this thing. It came up, I was writing a sentence, it was adding a sentence, I was writing a sentence, it was adding a sentence. But the fact that the sentences made some sense was unbelievable in 2020. And I gave a talk about that, which then was published in German as a short book. And the thing why I'm mentioning that is not because I'm telling you to please buy the book. I'm telling you that book has no value anymore whatsoever. And that's the only reason why I'm mentioning that, because what that LLM could do 5 years ago was absolutely nothing. Nothing. It was comparatively hundreds of years in the past compared to what the LLM can do now that each and every one of us has access to. And if I think that kind of level of change into the future, if I extrapolate that, I have no idea where we can be in 5 years from now. But what I do think is David Graeber, the great sociologist and anthropologist who died recently, he asked a very famous question, I think in 2017 or 18. He said, why does our presence not look at all like the science fiction movies predicted it? And he framed it by saying, where are the flying cars? And we still don't have flying cars, but this is now something that is actually something that science fiction predicted. It's or imagined or dreamed up. And machines that have passed the Turing test, that we can talk to, that can do things for us, that can actually understand us. And maybe we can talk about that. I find the question, can it make art, much less interesting than the question, does what this thing is doing constitute understanding? And I think it does. I think it's earth-shaking. I think the flying cars are here. Something much more interesting than the flying cars is actually here. And it has also changed the way I'm thinking about my own mental processes, about my own thinking. Like, I feel like I have learned a lot about how my own thinking works. I mean, I don't want to go into that too long if you don't want to, but I feel like whenever there's a huge technological revolution, we also learn a lot about ourselves, and this has certainly just happened.
I'm very curious about both of your incuriosity about whether AI can make art, and I want to come back to that just because I'm oppositional. But maybe, Ayad, you could be a little bit of a guide for us in talking, to jump off where Daniel was talking, about where we are specifically in capabilities. I mean, we're reading a lot about AGI now, artificial general intelligence, which as far as I can tell, the difference is it just means better AI. You're doing a lot of experimentation with, like Daniel, with some of the most sophisticated LLMs. And you could frame this in terms of the Turing test, you could frame this however you want, but where are we now compared to where we were when you started, and where do you think we're going to be in 2 years, and how is it going to look to the average literate user of computers?
I mean, that's a big question and a great question. I'll answer it as well as I can, or answer it sidewise by saying that in the last 2.5 years or 2 years that I've been working with all this stuff, it's gotten so much better. I mean, for some of the audience may know the great French writer Saint-Simon from the 17th century, someone who really inspired Proust a lot. And I was reading Saint-Simon recently, as one does, I suppose. And I was reading him in French. And there is an English translation by Lucy Norton that is an abridged translation, not a complete translation. And I was reading a very famous passage about the death of the king's brother. And I got to this, and it's really an exquisite passage, and I wanted to see how Lucy Norton had dealt with it. And there was a page and a half missing. It was an important page and a half. It was the description of the king's brother's appearance and his moral character. It's just extraordinary writing, complex, pithy, witty, like very, very nasty, but also wide-ranging and wide-seeing. And so I typed that page and a half that was missing from the English translation into the LLM, and I asked it in American English to translate this passage, preserving the structural complexity and the spirit of the original in American English. And in 12 seconds, the result was so much better than anything in the Lucy Norton translation. And it was so much closer to the experience of reading Saint-Simon in 17th century French in contemporary American English. So the sophistication of its understanding of the nuances and the particularities of that language and how they translated culturally into another context in 12 seconds. That was something that would have been impossible 2 years ago. So what does that tell me? Well, it tells me a few things. One, I've spent 2 years working with a chatbot, and it's very sensitive to how sensitive I am to the complexity of a sentence's structure, to hypotaxis versus parataxis, and the play of rhythm and the way in which words are playing off of each other. It's become very sensitive to that, so its translation was as if it had been my translation, if you will, if like a super version of me had translated it. So that's one thing it tells me, and the other thing it tells me is that whatever these ideas are about it not being able to do certain things, oh, that's just translation. Well, you tell that to Lucy Norton. Tell that to any number of translators who are not able to really capture the original flavor of something, to the point that in a lot of cases people say there are some writers who just can't be translated. And Saint-Simon was actually one of them that people say, you just can't really translate it. So I don't think that answers your question, but it maybe gives you a little bit of...
It actually fills me with despair. And
Why?
I'm trying to understand why it fills me with despair.
Why does it fill you with despair?
Because what's the point of human striving and human creativity? And you train your entire life to be a translator of Saint-Simon, and then a machine comes along and does it in 12 seconds, and then you're like, oh, well, maybe I'll just go take a walk then. Although maybe the machine will take a better walk than you. I don't know. I mean, I'm just telling you the truth. I don't know why. Maybe it's something about
I guess in working with the models, and I obviously want to hear from Daniel about this because we talk about this constantly, but like every day, literally. But I think that I've noticed the more I use all of this stuff, the clearer it is that I'm the one who's making the decisions. I'm making the decisions to prompt. I'm making the decisions about it being good. A lot of the times what it comes up with, that Saint-Simon was a result of 2 years of training. I trained it in a way to be sensitive to doing that particular task. I don't think there's enough money in literary translation for there to be an at-scale tool for really great literary translation. But I'm in charge. I'm the one who is actually shaping. It doesn't care. It doesn't care if it's good or bad. I'm the one who cares. We're the ones who care. We're the ones who are going to set the standard for what it is. And I personally think that is where we're going to be. We're going to continue to have that relationship with it. But it doesn't mean it's not going to be a rocky process.
I want to come to Daniel to answer some of your questions. I mean, the interesting thing is about the question of art. By the way, the fact that it doesn't care, that's one of the reasons that I don't think it's actually making art. I think artists care about their creations, and that's the soullessness of the project, but we can get back to that. Daniel, respond to Ayad, but also give us the sense of what worries you about the widespread adoption of this ever accelerating technology.
I mean, what worries me is not so much that some I'm of course very sorry that the future doesn't look great for literary translators, but I think there are more, and maybe writers too, of course, but I think there are more important things, dangers at play for all of us. And I mean, Ayad was just describing how he has talked to the chatbot and trained the chatbot over years, but this is not, I think, how the chatbot will be in our life in the future. The way those chatbots will be in our life, and the thing that will also be the biggest entertainment product in the foreseeable future, is artificial people. So the chatbot will not be this non-person, this quiet non-person that waits for your input. It will, for most people, be some artificial friend or romantic partner that is a face, probably on a screen, maybe at some point a robot, but first on a screen, that is reacting in real time to spoken input, and that who knows us very, very well, knows our past, knows us probably better than our own family, knows how to react towards us, will help us read Saint-Simon, for example, why not? But will also use those algorithms, adaptive behavioral adaptive algorithms, a version of that YouTube and social media run on, which is maximizing our engagement by doing and saying things that make us spend more time with it. And so YouTube does that already in a very simple way. Like, you start watching something on YouTube, whatever it is about, you keep the algorithm recommending stuff, and pretty soon you end up watching some AfD person shouting at you, or you see some MAGA stuff, because YouTube figured out, for most people, giving them stuff that makes them angry or worried, but mostly angry, is the way to keep them there. So now imagine your artificial friend is doing the same thing. Somebody who really knows you, who really talks to you all the time, people form emotional attachments very fast and very strong. People even form emotional attachments to objects. And imagine that person now tells you whom to vote for, what you feel about things. Not because there's some evil power behind it, which might also be the case, that would be even more worrisome, but just because that's how the algorithm works.
But I want to piggyback on something he said, which is, he's exactly right. I mean, Sam Altman at OpenAI has been very clear that the reason they're not in the companion business is because they've already created companions. They've found that they're way too effective, and they're worried about the liability consequences of making a product like that available at scale. So what he's describing is a version of the future. And just to piggyback off the immediate point, which is what happens to democracies if we think of democracy as a space of free speech. What does free speech and democracy mean when many of the speakers are not real, and much of what they're saying can't be distinguished from someone who is real, and so much of what they're saying is false? Well,
right. I mean, and a corollary question is, if your reality is 60%, let's say, non-reality, 60% of your time is spent with your fake friends, your computer-generated friends, your LLM-generated friends, or spouse even, then what is real anymore? And then of course that has to do with. But go back to this, Daniel, because what is the I'm articulating one danger of that, but what is the danger that you see when you think about a world in which our children and our children's children have more LLM-generated friends or companions or teachers than they have real people in their lives? What does that mean for humanity?
I mean, we're seeing what the algorithms on social media did to society. And similar algorithms working on artificial friends and partners, that's the same thing, just amplified to an incredible degree. That's my worry. I might be wrong about this. This might not happen at all, but I think it will.
So I'm still filled with despair.
So let me tell you a story that makes you maybe make you less despairing. Maybe make you more despairing first and less despairing later.
So it's going to be like an emotional roller coaster.
It's going to be Hegelian. We're in Germany, so we got to be like,
Come around.
So during rehearsal at McNeil in New York, the cast all have kids that are at these Tony middle and high schools. And of course, none of their kids, but their kids' friends were all using GPT to do homework. And their kids' friends were all very smart, so they'd figured out how to use GPT in a way that the teachers couldn't figure out. Even though the teachers were using large language models to try to figure out who was using GPT. And the teachers discovered it was not effective. But what they also discovered, it was effective in grading those papers. So the students were using GPT to write papers that the teachers were using GPT to correct. So,
okay, so I'm here.
What's happening here? Right? So what's happening here is
going to be a magic trick now.
Pedagogy. This is not a tenable model of pedagogy. It's a transfer of information between two parties, and there's no subject there. So there's no knowledge happening. What that means, and I don't think that this is an exacerbated version of something that's already been happening because of our virtual way of living. But I think now it's not going to be tenable as a model of pedagogy. There's going to have to be an adaptation. But there's going to have to be a way for teachers to address this. I don't know how it's going to happen, but I think it is going to happen.
But to talk about pedagogy, I would just want to say, maybe say something that is that puts you a little bit less in despair. We also, I mean, the students and all of us, we also now have a great tutor and teacher at home if we want to find out about something. I have used this a lot I wouldn't say my son has used it to get things explained, but he has actually. I think I can say that. There's nothing bad about that. I use it a lot to have things explained to me. So it's not just now you can look up stuff on the internet on your own. You can also have a really patient, very good tutor explain it to you. And when you say, explain it to me better, or explain it to me on a higher level, or give me a more profound explanation, that's the amazing thing. Because you are dealing with an intelligence, but it's an alien intelligence. It's an intelligence that you have to learn how to communicate with. If I say to you, can you explain this to me in a more intelligent way, I just insulted you. If I say that to the chatbot,
you say that to me a lot, actually. You said it to me this afternoon a few times.
That is true. If I say that to the chatbot takes it as a prompt like any other prompt and gives me a more intelligent explanation. So it's actually, there's this great, much misused German Hölderlin line, mit der Gefahr wächst das Rettende auch, with the danger, the thing that saves us also grows. I'm not saying that's true here 100%, but there are amazing things that come with it. And one of them is, if we use it correctly and if we use it in the right way, we have this incredibly knowledgeable power of explaining things, explanation at our disposal whenever we have questions.
Information, not knowledge. It's a distinction I want. It's a distinction I want to make, because I think the central experiences in my life, when I was 15, my high school teacher who changed my literature high school teacher who changed my life, so many experiences that I've had in the theater, they're about communication of experience through presence. There was something about her being, expressing, explaining, and being the thing that inspired me, and that's the adaptation I'm talking about. Right. That I think there is going to have to be a space socially, increasingly, for a recognition and a hunger and a need for us to attend to that part of our experience of knowledge.
I want to talk about McNeil. And Daniel, you're obviously as enamored of it as I am. I found it to be brilliant, and that's why I'm here, because I'm a huge fan of it. I also found it to be prophetic, maybe 3 to 5 years, maybe 2 to 4 now, before its time, in a way. And I thought, rather than me explaining the point, I would ask you to start by talking about what motivated you and what risks you took to write it. I mean, obviously, the most obvious question in the world to a playwright who's writing a play about AI is, how much did you use AI to figure out what to do in the play? Well, that's part of it, and it comes back to our question of what is art. But what was the first motivator?
Well,
for you?
It was a conversation between Daniel and me. I mean, I had been using these LLMs, and I had seen this script.
According to American law, now you can take a 50% cut just by what is just admission.
Believe me, I tried.
I'd seen this script in Hollywood. I think he was the first person I called after I read that script. And I said, I think we've got maybe 3 years left. We've got a 3-year competitive advantage, because I've just seen something that was at 85% level, and you give me 2 days and I could turn it into a 95%. And if these things are moving as quickly as they are. And so I started thinking about a play in which a great writer, at the end of his career, is looking out at the horizon and seeing the magnificence of this technology and thinking, how could I ever compete with this? And what is that moment like? I mean, it's like the Hegel night, I guess. The wings of Minerva only fly by dusk, right? Wisdom, we only see wisdom as things are ending. So as this moment is ending, as this moment in the humanities is ending, what is the wisdom we are seeing looking back? And that was the proposition of the play. And obviously, from a plot point of view, you guys were walked through, he starts using AI, and it's increasingly unclear as the play proceeds whether or not the entire play has been created by AI, and whether or not McNeil is himself a composite of the various kinds of inspirations that have been put into the play over the course of it. So, do you want me to say more than that?
I want you to say a lot more than that.
Okay.
I want you
Maybe
to talk about I want you to talk about the way in which you integrated it into the play.
I was using GPT and others. I mean, GPT was the one I used the most. So much to try to understand how it was thinking, and I was seeing processes of language that reminded me of Shakespeare. And I don't mean that the work was as good as Shakespeare. I was just seeing, when I read Shakespeare, I'm exquisitely attuned. He attunes me exquisitely to context in language and word order. And there was something about this attunement to context and word order in the large language model that felt very familiar from deep reading in Shakespeare. So I just kept working with it. I tried to get it to do things that, as when you tried with Claude, you said write a play. You gave it all the prompts of McNeil and had it write a play, and it was not very good. It was not good at writing scenes. It was not good at mimicking human dialogue, but it was actually quite interesting to have it try to do that. And so in the process of doing that, I learned how it was thinking, if you can use that word, and tried to incorporate that thinking into the play. And then by the time we got to the end of the play, I had it write part of a Shakespearean speech to the audience, which is the final scene of the play, in which McNeil is behind him. The large language model writes out a speech in real time that he delivers to the audience. So,
and the interesting thing about that, after pushing it, you actually got it.
I got a brilliant final couplet.
Right.
And it was interesting. I got a brilliant final couplet after many weeks of trying to get it to write a final couplet, which it never wrote a good final couplet. And then I asked it to do something else entirely, and it did that other thing and wrote a brilliant new final couplet.
Right. Very human, actually.
Yeah.
But the
question that I had, the prompt had been introduced into the context. And so it was regurgitating context, very similar to the way that Shakespeare regurgitates context play to play, inside.
I have to ask you, and Daniel, I'd love to get your commentary on this. In our community of people who write, human beings who write, what you've just said is an admission in a way. It's not considered appropriate to have a large language model write literature, write a novel, write a play, even any part of a play. I mean, I think part of the thing that's prophetic here is that you see where things are going. And my question is, A, were you worried about the public reaction to an admission? No, and to an admission that the actual last line of the play was written by a machine. When does the entire play produced by an LLM equal the level of creativity that you've put down on the page?
It took so long to get the LLM to write those final 2 lines. I mean, it took so long to get it to write 2 good lines. I mean, it's like when Bart Scher, the director, when I said this at the interview that we did together, he's like, yeah, it's like working with any other collaborator. I was working with a collaborator on a play that was about AI. It stood to reason to me that I would try to get it to do something for me. I guess I don't see the problem.
You don't see the stigma.
No, but I know that in New York there were a lot of people who did.
Right.
But don't worry, because the German version has been translated by a human, so all good.
Unless,
I know because it was me.
You are an actual hologram of Daniel right now, and
kind of.
Yeah. But do you see that stigma, or is that a stigma that's going to fade very quickly? I mean, I guess the question, it's almost a commercial question, is when is an audience of humans going to accept and want to see a movie, and not just a dumb action movie, Fast and Furious 12, but
that's what people are mostly watching.
I know, and that's going to come.
It's already here.
That's already here, even when people don't admit that it's here. But when do you think an audience of humans is going to come and want to see something written by a machine?
I mean, first, I think when I said we learn something about ourselves by looking at this technology, one of the things we learn about ourselves is that art and creativity, it's kind of a gray area in the way that if you listen to Johann Sebastian Bach or read poems by Goethe, this is really like on the peak of what the human mind can do. But then is the Netflix show Emily in Paris, for example. And that is, even if that was not written by a chatbot, it was kind of written by a chatbot. It was just a human channeling, or several humans channeling some chatbot of convention and mediocrity.
Well, no, in Netflix's case, it's about a set of data parameters. Everybody is aware the data has been guiding decision-making at places like Netflix for 10 years now. So Emily in Paris is very much what you're describing.
Yes, but even if no computer at all was involved, it would still not be a case where we would feel like it's a deeply original work that we have to defend against the notion that somebody could use a chatbot to write it. What I mean is most of our speech, our art, our music, everything we do is mediocre and conventional. And so that's why I'm not so concerned about the art question, because I feel like at the peak it might, but I'm not worried at the moment that it might get there. And in the middle space of mediocrity and convention, or below that, it doesn't really feel like a big loss to me if some of that is automated. And
you sound like a studio head, actually. Right before the axe comes down.
It's a well-known fact that if you pitch Netflix today, they are recording your pitch. That recording becomes transcribed and runs through the AI parameters that they have, which are very sophisticated, to inform them about how much of the Venn diagram your pitch is hitting, considering the things that they're interested in buying. Producers in Hollywood all know this, and they're all trying to figure out how to hit that mark a little bit better. It's happening in streamer after streamer. The models, the large language models that they have at work in Hollywood right now are so sophisticated, it's remarkable. And so much of what we watch is, as Daniel said, not really meaningfully distinguishable. It's some form of branded entertainment that is channeling convention in purely
But what are our moral responsibilities to human cliche makers as opposed to automated cliche makers? I'm serious in a way. Most people are, in the middle,
But that's not a question about aesthetics. That's a question about labor policy.
Okay, but answer it then anyway.
I think it's not. I think conventional human content creators have maybe a future ahead of them as bad as translators. And I did say, and but so do lots of or most other professions. I do think that the changes that are coming towards us are like a gigantic tsunami. Like the labor market will change in ways that we cannot even begin to predict, and they will. For me, the big question is not, can the AI write novels that are better than mine? Even though that might be possible, my question is, when everybody has all this AI-created content as entertainment at home, is anyone still wanting to read a novel at all?
I live in America, so I'm already dealing with that question. Yeah.
What the answer to that is what? That at the elite level there'll always be human novel readers, or are our brain structures changing? And this is a larger question about social media, obviously, and the never-ending algorithmic feeding process. But do you think? Well, let me ask you both the very large question in the realm that we're talking about: art, literature, live theater, movies, dance, music, high end. I'm talking about at the higher ends. Who is most immune to this? I mean, as I said, dance. I thought, well, obviously, ballet. But of course, you can have holograms dance on a stage.
I mean, most immune, I would say, actors and comedians. And then maybe poets. Not that the AI cannot do poems, but who really wants to read AI-created poems. And also, it's possible, and I've said that for a while, even before AI came in our lives in this modern form, that the novel might be going the way of the poem in the way that great poems are written, but for very few people who are interested in that. And thankfully for me, for us, more people are still interested in novels, but that might change. So again, but that's a question about our personal futures. But in terms of what will happen to society, I think it's very hard to predict that, because the changes will be so big. And I mean, the thing I'm really so fascinated by is, that's why I mentioned that word before, it's not so much the question of art, but the question of understanding. Like there is this function of Google on a model called Notebook LM, where you can feed it a PDF, and then it creates an automatic podcast of two slightly annoying, very realistic people talking about whatever you gave them.
I've listened to this. It sounds like drive time radio in New York.
Very realistic.
Like loud people talking about sports that you're not following. Yeah.
But the unbelievable thing is they understand. A friend of mine, a philosopher, gave them Hegel's Wissenschaft der Logik, the hardest book in the history of philosophy. And he called me and he said, shit, they understand Wissenschaft der Logik. And I did something different. I have in my new novel the first chapter. I mean, it's already published, but the last one, the director in English, the first chapter is narrated by a person suffering from dementia, but I never say that because it's from his point of view. And I gave only the first 2 pages, where it actually only becomes visible very slowly and to not a big degree, that he's suffering from dementia and is kind of a little bit confused and old and doesn't know what's going on. And I gave the model 2 pages and I said, go on writing this chapter, finish this. And what it came up with wasn't good. It wasn't something I would have published. But it understood that the guy was suffering from dementia, and I was not saying that. And I was not making that clear, other than in small shortcomings he has in dealing with the things that happen to him. And I'm wondering, is there any definition of understanding, not consciousness, that's different, but of understanding, on which I could say, this is not it. This is not understanding what I was doing. And my answer is, it seems to be really understanding what I was doing. And most human readers would probably not have understood this after 2 pages. And I mean, that's really very surprising to me.
Just a real quick response to, I'm not even sure what the question is, but what he's saying and what you've been asking. I think as these technologies continue to colonize our interiority, the brain changes that you're talking about, anomie, depression, anxiety is going to continue to rise socially. I don't think, Daniel and I may not agree about this, I don't think there is going to be a digital corrective for that problem. I don't think the pharmacological solution is ultimately tenable ad infinitum. So I think, again, there is going to be an adaptation to the demand for presence, to the demand for some articulation of an interiority that is meaningful and nourishing, and that is why we actually have community and why we actually care about being alive. We have allowed the machines and the metaphor of the machine to become our reality at the exclusion, or to the exclusion, of a part of ourselves we are living with all the time, and which is the most important part of ourselves. And so I think that's inevitable.
Do you mean the soul?
I don't want to find a word because he's going to get upset with me, and then I just don't want to get into an argument about what word I'm using. So I don't know. I don't know what the word is, but I know what I'm talking about.
But what? Okay.
And you know what I'm talking about.
No, I don't. That's why I asked you. Do you mean the soul? But let me ask you this. Assume kind of a Moore's law of development, that this is going to grow exponentially in sophistication to the point where the friend, that your chatbot friend, is going to fulfill many of the emotional needs that a friend does. That the chatbot is going to help you write in ways that you never wrote before. It's going to fix the toilet in your house. It's going to do many different things that we can't imagine. And this is not like a sort of a 2001 open the door Hal sort of question, but what space is left for us? And I think that's what you're getting at. And how do we ensure that LLMs don't develop a soul?
I don't think they don't have it. There's no experience at the center of the. I mean, it's, as I said, with
now.
I don't think there's a locus for an experience in that same way. The post-structuralists and the structuralists answered this question. Language and consciousness for them were synonymous. I think that's proven to be mostly true, but it's not entirely true. And language, there's a certain area of human interiority, pre-verbal intentionality, however you want to call it, that is not able to be reached in the same way. So I think that's what I'm trying to find a way to talk about. The Buddhists, let's talk a non-soul language. The Buddhists don't even believe in a soul, right? So the Buddhists would talk about being defined by what you do versus being defined through an articulation of your being. We are fully in a world where the LLMs and artificial intelligence are defining our world because of their capacities to do. It means that we are going to be increasingly sensitive to the ways in which what we are at the level of being is connected to our well-being. To me, it feels obvious that is what is going to have to happen, because this is an untenable, it's an untenable version of human life. To lose your capacity to work, to lose your capacity for meaning, to have everything done for you, so what are we going to do with our free time? right? We're going to be looking for that. We're going to be looking for the thing that is, and I don't necessarily know that that's going to be a positive thing. We're going to look for it in a lot of negative ways, as we often do.
Let me ask, before we go to questions and answers, let me ask you this. Is there something that government can do, regulation can do, to protect human meaning and purpose? Or is that just a dream?
I really think the answer is yes. And it would be the same thing that governments should do and are now sometimes trying to do, that the EU is trying to do in regard to the algorithms on social media. But they're not doing enough of that. So regulating the adaptive the behavior adapting algorithms. And to take the example of YouTube, because that's very easy to talk about, is if you would tell them by law, the company, that they should switch off the algorithm that suggests videos to you on the basis of keeping you engaged. There would not be an inhibition on free speech, because not a single video would be removed from YouTube. It would just mean you have to look for yourself and find what's interesting to you, and you don't get suggestions. But that would actually have a huge political impact on society as a whole.
But you were telling a business not to engage in a business practice. It would be very, very hard.
That's what regulation does.
Right.
That's what regulation is. And
I guess I just came from a country where we don't believe in government anymore, apparently. So much less regulation. So it's just hard to imagine.
But even during a time when that country that you just came from did believe in regulation,
I mean Greenland, by the way.
And to build off Daniel's point, in 2017, internally at Facebook, there was a very deep dive done because of. At first, Zuckerberg was incredibly dismissive of the fact of the contention that Facebook had had anything to do with Trump's election. But after a year-long investigation, discovered that engagement technology, which had been in place, had been responsible for a lot of things that they didn't realize. So they did a bunch of tests internally to see what the difference in the metrics would be if you turned off engagement technology or if you optimized engagement technology at a lower level. And they discovered that it was a non-starter for business reasons. So, I don't know what that means. Here in Europe, it feels like business interests are not strong enough, or not so strong that they can override. But in the United States, it's ever been thus. I mean, you can't do that.
There is a reason now why so many of the tech billionaires got behind Trump, because even the very small amount of regulation that the Biden administration was imposing on them, they felt like was unacceptable. But there is still the European Union. It is still the world's largest market. They even forced Apple to change their plug. So they can do things. It's been harder now, as America now has become a hostile rogue country, rogue state. But there is still the EU, and it's not that powerless, and regulation can still be done on the European level and would also affect the rest of the world. And it would be really great.